7 women laughed at his cabin. The 8th discovered who the caretaker really was. The 7th candidate looked at the wooden cabin, looked at Nathaniel Brooks, and let out a laugh so loud that the birds fled from the trees. "You are joking, right?" Nathaniel sighed. He already knew that tone. "No, ma'am, I live here." The woman, who had arrived all perfumed and smiling less than 10 minutes ago, pointed to the imposing mansion rising at the top of the hill, about 300 meters away. "And that huge house up there? That gorgeous 3-story estate? That is where I work." "Work doing what?" "I take care of the property." The candidate crossed her arms and looked at Nathaniel as if he had just confessed to being an alien. "Let me see if I understand this. You want me to marry a man who lives in a wooden cabin in the back of the yard, while his boss lives in a mansion? The cabin is comfortable. It has everything I need." "Does it have a bathroom?" "It does." "Inside the cabin?" "The shower is on the outside, but—" She was already walking toward her car before he finished the sentence. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Nathaniel, whatever." And just like that, for the 7th time in a row, Nathaniel Brooks watched a marriage candidate get in her car and drive down the dirt road without looking back. He stood on the cabin porch, hands in his pockets, watching the cloud of dust the car left behind. From the top of the hill, a figure appeared walking slowly. It was Sebastian, the butler, a man of 62 years with impeccable posture and the expression of someone who had seen it all in life. "Mr. Brooks," he said, stopping beside Nathaniel, "if you will allow me the observation, that was the fastest rejection so far. The previous one at least stayed 15 minutes. She only stayed because she needed to use the bathroom, Sebastian." "Still, 15 minutes is 15 minutes. Nathaniel looked at the butler with exhaustion in his eyes. "Do you think I'm being too stubborn? I think you are being faithful to your principles, but perhaps you could reconsider the strategy." "What strategy?" "I just want a woman who accepts me for who I am, not for what I have." Sebastian cleared his throat politely. "With all due respect, sir, what you have is quite considerable. We are talking about an 800-acre property, a mansion valued at millions, bank accounts that I prefer not to even mention, and—" "I know what I have, Sebastian. Then you also know that you are asking women to ignore all of that and fall in love with a man who chose to live in a cabin with an outdoor shower." "Exactly," Sebastian sighed. "Would you like me to prepare some tea?" "I would like you to prepare something stronger." "It is 2 in the afternoon, sir." "Then prepare tea after all." Nathaniel walked into the cabin and threw himself into the old armchair that had belonged to his grandfather. The cabin was simple but cozy. It had a small living room, a bedroom, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, and a bathroom that, yes, was inside the house, despite the outdoor shower he had installed because he liked bathing while looking at the stars. That cabin had history. His grandfather built it with his own hands when he arrived in the United States decades ago. Then came the hard work, the smart investments, the fortune that grew like an avalanche. But his grandfather never wanted to leave the cabin. He used to say that was where he felt at peace. Nathaniel inherited everything when his parents passed in a car accident 12 years ago. The mansion, the land, the money. But he also inherited the loneliness that came with it. He tried living in the big house for 2 years. 2 years walking through empty hallways, eating alone at enormous tables, sleeping in rooms that felt like museums, until one day, on a sleepless night, he walked to his grandfather's cabin and slept there. For the first time in months, he truly slept. The next day, he had his things brought over. He never went back to sleeping in the mansion. The problem was that no marriage candidate understood that. Mrs. Gloria, the matchmaker his aunt had hired, had already brought 7 women. 7. And all of them had the same reaction when they saw the cabin. The first one asked if there was an indoor bathroom. When Nathaniel explained about the outdoor shower, she pretended to receive an urgent phone call and said her mother had just fallen down the stairs. Nathaniel knew it was a lie because her mother called 10 minutes later asking if her daughter had arrived yet. The second one tripped over a chicken that was wandering loose around the property. She screamed so much that Nathaniel thought she had been bitten by a snake. When she found out it was just a chicken named Dorothy, The candidate said she would not marry a man who lets chickens roam free like a farmer from the 1800s, in her words. The third one was the most creative. She looked at the mansion on top of the hill, looked at the cabin, and asked if Nathaniel could negotiate a little room with his boss. Maybe an attic, a renovated pantry, anything with real walls? The fourth one said she was allergic to wood. Nathaniel did not know that was a thing, but he did not question it. The fifth one cried. She simply cried. She looked at the cabin, and the tears started rolling down. Nathaniel offered her a tissue, water, a chair. She just shook her head and left sniffling. The sixth one laughed. She burst out laughing, actually. She thought it was a prank from a television show. She spent 10 minutes looking for hidden cameras before realizing it was serious. And the seventh one, well, the seventh one had just left. The phone rang. It was Mrs. Gloria. Nathaniel, dear, how did it go with Margaret? She left. Already? But she just arrived. She did not like the cabin, Mrs. Gloria. Just like all the others. Oh, dear. The matchmaker's voice was full of a sympathy that Nathaniel did not know if it was genuine or professional. Maybe if you showed the mansion first. No, just a little peek. Mrs. Gloria, if I wanted a woman interested in the mansion, I would have found one myself. There are hundreds of them at every party I attend. I hired you precisely to find someone different. Mrs. Gloria was silent for a moment. Nathaniel, you know I have been a friend of your family for 30 years. Your aunt, may God rest her soul, asked me to look after you before she passed, and I take that responsibility seriously. I know, Mrs. Gloria. Then believe me when I say I have a new candidate, and this one is different. Nathaniel rolled his eyes but said nothing. Her name is Clara Bennett, Mrs. Gloria continued. 29 years old, hard-working, well-mannered. She has been through some difficult times recently. Her family lost everything, and she is starting her life over. And why would she be different from the others? Because Clara is not looking for wealth, Nathaniel. She is running away from it. That caught his attention. What do you mean? It is not my story to tell, but trust me, this young woman is not going to care about a cabin, a mansion, or a loose chicken. She just wants peace. Nathaniel looked through the cabin window. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Dorothy, the chicken, was pecking quietly near the fence. When is she coming? Tomorrow morning. Nathaniel sighed. All right, one more try. This one is going to be different, Nathaniel, I promise. He hung up the phone without much hope. He had already heard that promise 7 times. Sebastian appeared at the door with a tray. Your tea, sir. Thank you, Sebastian. And if I may ask, did Mrs. Gloria have any news? There is another candidate. She arrives tomorrow. Sebastian placed the tray on the table with excessive care. Would you like me to prepare something special? Perhaps an elegant lunch? No. If she does not accept me eating a sandwich on the porch, then she will not accept me at all. Understood, sir. Sebastian paused. Should I hide the chickens? Nathaniel almost smiled. Leave Dorothy free. If the candidate does not like chickens, it is better to find out right away. As you wish, sir. Sebastian retreated, and Nathaniel was left alone with his tea, his doubts, and a stubborn hope that refused to disappear completely. Tomorrow another candidate would come. She would probably leave just like all the others. But what if she did not? What if Mrs. Gloria was right? What if, finally, someone appeared who could look at that simple cabin and see what Nathaniel saw? A home, a refuge, a place where money did not matter and people could just be people. He took a sip of his tea and looked up at the wooden ceiling. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself. Let us see what tomorrow brings. The following morning, Nathaniel was on his knees in the dirt, pulling weeds from the rosebed, talking to the flowers as if they could answer. Do you think this one is going to be different? He murmured, pulling a stubborn root. Because I am running out of hope here. The roses swayed with the wind. Nathaniel took that as a maybe. Mrs. Gloria said she does not care about money, that she's running from wealth. He let out a humorless laugh. Sounds like a joke. Who runs from money? Silence. The flowers had no answer for that. You know what the problem is? Nathaniel continued, now pruning a dry branch with more force than necessary. The problem is that all of them look at this cabin and see poverty. Failure. A man who has not accomplished anything in life. None of them can imagine that someone would choose to live this way. Dorothy, the chicken, appeared out of nowhere and started pecking near him. "What do you think, Dorothy? Is candidate number 8 going to run away too?" The chicken made a noise that sounded suspiciously like mockery. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." Nathaniel turned his attention back to the roses. He enjoyed gardening. He enjoyed putting his hands in the soil, feeling the sun on his back, watching the plants grow. It was real, honest, different from the business meetings and fancy dinners he avoided at all costs. "If she leaves," he said to a particularly beautiful red rose, "I swear I am giving up. I will become an official hermit. You are going to be my only company." "Excuse me?" Nathaniel froze. That voice did not belong to a plant or a chicken. He turned slowly, still on his knees with dirt on his hands, sweat on his forehead, and a leaf stuck in his hair. Standing at the garden entrance was a woman with brown hair, big eyes, and the expression of someone who was not sure she had arrived at the right place. "You are Nathaniel Brooks?" she asked, tilting her head. "I am." He stood up too quickly, tripped over a pot, almost fell, and managed to catch his balance at the last second by grabbing a fence. "That is me, Nathaniel." "That is me," the woman blinked. "Were you talking to the flowers?" "No." Pause. "Maybe." Another pause. "It is a gardening technique. I read it in an article. Plants enjoy company." "And the chicken?" Dorothy chose that moment to cluck loudly, as if she was tattling on him. "The chicken is just a chicken." Nathaniel wiped his hands on his pants, realized that only spread more dirt, and gave up. "You must be Clara Bennett." "I am. Mrs. Gloria said you would arrive in the morning. I was not expecting you this early. She told me 9 o'clock. It is 9:15. Nathaniel looked at his watch and nearly choked. He had completely lost track of time talking to the plants. "Right? Well, I apologize for the—" He gestured vaguely at himself, covered in dirt and leaves. For the general situation, Clara did not seem bothered. In fact, she was looking around with an expression Nathaniel could not decipher. "Is this the property?" she asked. "It is." Nathaniel braced himself for the inevitable question. "The mansion is up there at the top of the hill, but I live down here, in this cabin." He pointed to the wooden structure behind him, waiting to see the same disappointment as always appear on her face, the same disbelief, the same contempt disguised as politeness. But Clara Bennett did none of that. She looked at the cabin, she looked at the garden, she looked at the trees around them, at the blue sky, at Dorothy pecking peacefully, and then she did something that none of the 7 previous candidates had done. She smiled. "Thank God," she whispered, almost to herself. "Finally. Peace." Nathaniel blinked, confused. "What did you say?" "Nothing." Clara shook her head, but the smile did not disappear. It is very beautiful here." "Quiet?" "Yes. No honking, no people screaming. No." She stopped, as if she had said too much. "It is just that I came from a complicated situation." Nathaniel noticed something in her eyes, a shadow, a pain she was trying to hide behind polite smiles. He knew that pain. He saw it in the mirror every day. "Mrs. Gloria mentioned you have been through some difficult times," he said carefully. Clara crossed her arms, a defensive gesture. "Mrs. Gloria talks too much. She is a matchmaker. Talking too much is her job." That drew a small laugh from Clara. A real laugh. "Fair enough." They stood in silence for a moment. Dorothy took the opportunity to investigate Clara's shoes, who looked down in surprise. "Her name is Dorothy," Nathaniel explained. "She is harmless, just curious. You gave the chicken a name?" "She already had a name when she arrived here. I just kept it." Clara crouched down and petted Dorothy on the head, who seemed to approve of the new visitor. "I like chickens," Clara said. "My grandmother had a huge chicken coop. I used to spend my vacations there when I was a child." Nathaniel felt something strange in his chest. Hope, maybe. A small spark he tried to ignore, because he had already been burned 7 times. "Would you like to see the cabin?" he asked. "I know it is not much, but—" "Yes, I would." She said it without hesitation, without looking at the mansion on top of the hill with desire, without asking if he could negotiate a better room. Nathaniel opened his mouth to warn her about the outdoor shower, about the small kitchen, about all the things that had scared away the other candidates. But something made him stop. Clara Bennett was standing there, petting a chicken, smiling at a wooden cabin as if it were the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. And in her eyes, Nathaniel did not see disappointment. He saw relief. "This way," he said, leading the way. As they climbed the porch steps, Nathaniel noticed that Clara was carrying only one small suitcase. A single suitcase to start a new life. That said a lot about where she came from. And for the first time in months, Nathaniel Brooks felt that maybe, just maybe, Mrs. Gloria was right. This candidate was different. But he did not know yet just how much. Because Clara Bennett was not just running from a difficult life, she was running from someone. And that someone had no intention of letting her go so easily. Clara walked into the cabin looking at every detail as if she were visiting a museum. "It is cozy," she said, running her hand along the rustic wooden table. "You take very good care of the place." "Thank you. How long have you been working here?" Nathaniel opened his mouth to explain that he did not work there, that he was the owner of everything, the cabin, the mansion, the 800 acres around it. But before he could form a single word, Clara kept talking. "Honest work is the most beautiful thing there is. My grandfather was a carpenter. He built his own house with his hands. I have always admired people like that, you know? People who are not ashamed of working hard." She looked at him with such sincerity, such genuine admiration that Nathaniel choked on the truth. Yes, hard work. That is what I do. You can tell. Your hands are the hands of someone who works the land." Nathaniel looked at his own hands, still dirty from gardening. Technically, she was not wrong. "And the owner of the mansion?" Clara asked, peeking through the window toward the big house at the top of the hill. "What is he like?" "He is." Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Private. Travels a lot, hardly ever shows up." "Good. An absent boss is the best kind of boss." Nathaniel nodded, feeling the hole of his lie getting deeper and deeper. "So you live here and take care of the entire property by yourself?" "I have help, sometimes, but I prefer to do things myself." Clara smiled, and that smile did something strange to Nathaniel's stomach. "I like you, Nathaniel Brooks. You are different from the men I have known." He almost asked, "Different how?" But he was afraid of the answer. He was afraid that she liked him precisely because she thought he was poor. And that meant she would stop liking him when she found out the truth. So Nathaniel did what any sensible person would do in that situation. He kept his mouth shut and let the misunderstanding grow. The following days were a completely new experience for Nathaniel Brooks. Clara Bennett settled into the cabin's guest room, a tiny space that barely fit a single bed and an old dresser. She did not complain once. In fact, she seemed genuinely happy there. And she had many opinions about how to save money. "You are wasting water," she said on the first morning, watching Nathaniel wash the dishes. "I am?" "You are. Look." She took the basin, placed it under the faucet, and started demonstrating. "You soap everything first, then rinse it all together. It saves at least half the water." Nathaniel had never thought about that. At the mansion, the housekeepers took care of the dishes. He did not even know where the sponge was. "And this rice water?" Clara pointed to the pot he was about to throw away. "What about it?" "Do not throw it out. It works for watering the plants. It is full of nutrients." "Really? You are a gardener and you did not know that?" Nathaniel felt his face get hot. "I am more of a pruning kind of guy. Pulling weeds, that sort of thing." Clara shrugged and saved the rice water in a bucket. "Now you know. Your rose bushes will thank you." On the third day, Clara made a bone soup that, according to her, would last at least 4 meals. "The secret is to not waste anything," she explained, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon. "Bones have more flavor than the meat, and they are much cheaper." Nathaniel tasted the soup and widened his eyes. "This is delicious." "Of course it is. My grandmother's recipe. But you made this with practically nothing." Clara smiled proudly. "Making a lot with a little is an art, Nathaniel. When you grow up without money, you learn fast." He wanted to say that he had never grown up without money, that his bank account had more zeros than she could possibly imagine, that the soup they were having cost less than the coffee Sebastian prepared at the mansion. But Clara was so happy, so relaxed, that he could not bring himself to ruin the moment. "Teach me more," he said instead. And she did. On the 5th day, Clara introduced the technique of cutting a bar of soap into 8 pieces. On the 7th day, she showed him how to make homemade detergent using ash and fat. "Did you know you could do this?" she asked, excited like a child showing off a science fair project. "I had no idea," Nathaniel answered, genuinely fascinated. He was learning more about household economics in 1 week than he had learned in 34 years of life. And the strangest part? He was enjoying it. Meanwhile, at the mansion on top of the hill, Sebastian was watching everything through the window with binoculars. "Tony," he called, without taking his eyes off the scene down below. "Come see this." The gardener walked over and peeked over the butler's shoulder. "What is the boss doing?" "Cutting a bar of soap into 8 pieces. "Why?" "Because the young woman said it saves money." Tony blinked, confused. "But he is a billionaire." "I know. He owns shares in 3 soap companies." "I know. He could literally buy the entire factory." "Tony, I know." The two stood in silence, watching Nathaniel hold a tiny piece of soap as if it were a precious treasure. "This is the strangest thing I have ever seen," Tony said. Sebastian took a deep breath. "You did not see him learning to reuse rice water." "He did that?" "With notes. He took notes, Tony." The gardener shook his head. "Love does strange things to people. That is not love. That is insanity." But Sebastian was wrong. It was a little bit of both. In the second week, Nathaniel realized he was eagerly waiting for his moments with Clara. The mornings drinking coffee together on the porch, the afternoons working in the garden side by side. Thereat, the evenings talking about everything and nothing, sitting on the cabin steps while the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Clara talked about her difficult childhood, about the parents who worked hard their entire lives, about the grandmother who taught her everything she knew about household economics. Nathaniel listened to every word, absorbing stories from a life completely different from his own. "And you?" she asked one evening. "What was your childhood like?" Nathaniel hesitated. "Normal. Nothing very interesting." "Are your parents still alive?" "No, they passed 12 years ago." Clara held his hand gently. "I am sorry." "It is all right. It has been a long time." She did not press for more details, and Nathaniel was silently grateful for that. Talking about his parents would mean talking about the inheritance, and talking about the inheritance would mean destroying that perfect moment. So he stayed quiet, enjoying the warmth of her hand in his, pretending to be someone he was not. The lie was growing, and the bigger it grew, the harder it would be to tell the truth. At the mansion, Sebastian had an idea. "Sir," he said, appearing at the cabin on an afternoon when Clara had gone to town to buy sewing thread. "We need to talk." About this situation. The young woman thinks you are a gardener. A caretaker. She thinks I am a caretaker. It does not matter. The point is that she does not know who you really are." Nathaniel sighed. "I know, Sebastian. And what do you intend to do about it?" "I'm going to tell her. Eventually." "When? When you are married? When you have children? When you have to explain why the gardener has a private jet?" "Sebastian." "Sir, with all due respect, this is not going to end well. Lies always collect their price." Nathaniel knew the butler was right. Of course he knew. But every time he thought about telling the truth, he saw Clara's face smiling at him on the porch, admiring his dirty hands, saying she liked him because he was different. She liked Nathaniel the gardener. Nathaniel, who was learning to save soap. Simple Nathaniel. What if she did not like wealthy Nathaniel? "Give me more time," he asked. "Just a little more." Sebastian shook his head, but did not insist. "As you wish, sir. But I suggest you do it quickly. Secrets have the terrible habit of revealing themselves at the worst possible moments." The butler returned to the mansion, leaving Nathaniel alone with his thoughts. That night, while Clara prepared dinner humming softly, Nathaniel made a decision. He would tell her the truth at the end of the week. He would explain everything. The mansion, the money, the inheritance, the reason he lived in the cabin. If she left, at least he would have tried to be honest. But the weekend never came. Because the next day, while Nathaniel and Clara were working together in the garden, a black imported car began climbing up the dirt road, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Clara looked up, saw the vehicle approaching, and turned pale. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No, no, no. How did he find me?" Nathaniel frowned. "Clara, what is wrong?" "Who is it?" She did not answer. She just stood there, paralyzed, watching the car approach as if it were her worst nightmare coming to life. And when the vehicle stopped and the door opened, Nathaniel understood that Clara Bennett's problems were much bigger than he had imagined. The black car stopped in front of the cabin, and Clara held her breath. The door opened. A man in a brown uniform stepped out holding a clipboard and a package. "Delivery for Nathaniel Brooks?" Clara let out her breath so fast she nearly fainted. "Right here," Nathaniel said, signing the paper with hands that still trembled slightly. When the car drove away, Clara turned to him with watery eyes. "Sorry, I thought it was someone else." "Who?" "Nobody. Forget it." She went inside the cabin before Nathaniel could ask more questions. He stood in the garden, staring at the dirt road, wondering who this someone else was that left Clara so terrified. But that mystery would have to wait, because Nathaniel had a more urgent problem to solve. The employees. The next morning, Nathaniel went up to the mansion while Clara was still sleeping. Sebastian greeted him at the door with a cup of coffee and an expression of disapproval. "Emergency meeting," Nathaniel said, walking in quickly. "Call everyone." 5 minutes later, they were gathered in the mansion's kitchen. Sebastian, the 62-year-old butler, Tony, the 45-year-old gardener, Margaret, the 58-year-old cook, and the 3 security guards, whom Nathaniel only knew by their nicknames, Big Guy, Shorty, and Silent. "We have a situation," Nathaniel began, pacing back and forth. "The woman who is living in the cabin with me, the future Mrs. Brooks?" Margaret interrupted with a smile. "She does not know that I am the owner of the property." Silence. Sebastian closed his eyes as if he were experiencing physical pain. "She thinks I'm the caretaker," Nathaniel continued, "and she needs to keep thinking that. For now." Tony raised his hand as if he were in school. "Can I ask a question?" "Go ahead." "Why?" "Because I want her to like me for who I am, not for what I have." "But you are what you have," Sebastian said. "That does not make sense." "It makes sense to me." Margaret crossed her arms. "And what exactly do you want us to do?" "Disappear." Another silence. "What do you mean, disappear?" asked Big Guy, who despite his nickname had a surprisingly high-pitched voice. "Whenever she is around, nobody can be seen. Nobody can show up. If she finds out I have 6 employees, she is going to start asking questions." Sebastian took a deep breath. "Sir, with all due respect, I am 62 years old. My back hurts, my knee cracks, and you are asking me to play hide-and-seek. I am asking you to be discreet. Discreet is not showing up at parties. What you are asking is reverse espionage." "Sebastian, please." The butler looked at the ceiling as if asking for divine patience. "Fine, but I'm going to formally register my objection." "Registered. Anyone else have objections?" Tony raised his hand again. "If I have to hide, who's going to take care of the north garden?" "You take care of it when she is not looking. And if she is always looking, then you work at night." "At night there are possums." "Tony, possums are not going to hurt you. You have never been chased by an angry possum at 3 in the morning. I have. It changed my life." Nathaniel rubbed his temples. "Does anyone else want to share traumas with wild animals? Or can we continue?" Margaret raised her hand. "I am afraid of owls." "Noted. Let us move on." The plan was established. Whenever Clara left the cabin to explore the property, the employees were to disappear from sight immediately. No noise, no traces, like very well-paid ghosts. The first test happened the very next day. Clara woke up feeling like exploring. She told Nathaniel she wanted to see every corner of the property, find the boundaries of the land, maybe discover a nice spot for a picnic. Nathaniel sent a text message to Sebastian. "She is coming out. Activate the protocol." Sebastian replied, "This is humiliating." Nathaniel ignored it. Clara walked around the property with Nathaniel by her side, pointing at the trees, admiring the flowers, asking questions about every plant she saw. Everything was going well until she decided to head toward the north garden. "What is over there?" she asked, pointing at the bushes. "Nothing interesting, just more plants." "I love plants. Let us go see." Nathaniel had no choice. He walked beside her, praying that Tony had received the warning. Tony had received it. The problem was where he chose to hide. When Clara approached the north garden, Nathaniel saw something move inside the ornamental fish pond. A head briefly surfaced above the water, looked around in panic, and dove back under. "Did you see that?" Clara asked, frowning. "See what?" "I thought I saw something in the pond. It must be a big fish." "It looked like a person?" "Very big fish." Clara got closer to the pond. Tony was submerged up to his nose, eyes wide, holding his breath. Several koi fish swam around him as if it were completely normal. "How strange," Clara murmured. "It looks like there is something at the bottom." Those are decorative rocks, Nathaniel said quickly, pulling her by the arm. Come on, I will show you the spring. It is much prettier. He dragged her away before Tony needed cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The second incident happened 2 days later. Clara decided to go get fresh eggs from the chicken coop. Nathaniel could not warn her in time. When she got there, she found Sebastian crouched behind a pile of hay, trying to look invisible. It was hard to look invisible when you were 6 feet tall and wearing a complete suit. Nathaniel, Clara called from inside the chicken coop. Why is there a suit hanging on the hay? Nathaniel ran over and saw Sebastian frozen like a statue, clearly holding his breath. It is a scarecrow, Nathaniel said. A scarecrow in a suit? An elegant scarecrow, for sophisticated chickens. Clara looked at him as if he had grown a second head. Sophisticated chickens? Dorothy is very demanding. As if understanding the cue, Dorothy appeared and started pecking at Sebastian's shoe. The butler shuddered but did not move. All right, Clara said slowly. You Americans are really strange. She collected the eggs and walked away, shaking her head. Sebastian only started breathing again when she disappeared from sight. Sir, he gasped, pulling straw from his hair. I am getting a raise for this. Granted. The third incident was the worst. Clara mentioned, innocently, that she would like to see the inside of the mansion. Not to live there, just to see it. After all, it was where Nathaniel's boss lived, right? Nathaniel panicked. He sent a message to everyone. She wants to see the mansion. Evacuate. Now. What followed was coordinated chaos. Margaret went out the back door carrying a cake she was baking. Big Guy jumped out the first-floor window and rolled through the bushes. Shorty hid inside a closet and stayed there for 3 hours because nobody told him when Clara left. Silent, true to his nickname, simply vanished without anyone seeing how. Clara walked into the mansion and looked around in awe. It is enormous, she said, and so empty. The owner lives here alone? He is solitary. How sad. Such a big house and nobody to share it with. Nathaniel felt his heart tighten. Not everyone with money is happy, Clara. I know, she sighed. I know that better than anyone. There was pain in that sentence, a story she had not yet told. They left the mansion in silence. Clara seemed thoughtful, lost in memories that Nathaniel desperately wanted to know. What a strange property, she commented when they returned to the cabin. I never see anyone working here. How does one person keep all of this running? Nathaniel swallowed hard. Dedication? You are incredible. You know that? Taking care of 800 acres practically by yourself. I could never do that. The guilt weighed like lead in Nathaniel's stomach. Clara, there is something I need to tell you, but before he could finish, Clara's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her face went white. What is wrong? Nathaniel asked. Clara did not answer. She just stared at the phone with an expression of pure terror. Clara, who is it? She finally raised her eyes and Nathaniel saw something that frightened him. Tears forming. He found me, she whispered. Victor found me. Clara's phone would not stop vibrating, message after message, call after call. Nathaniel watched her stare at the screen, her face growing paler by the second, as if she were seeing a digital ghost. Clara, what is going on? Who is Victor? She opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of an engine interrupted her. A black imported car, gleaming, completely out of place on that dirt road, was climbing up toward the cabin. No, Clara whispered, taking a step back. No. He cannot be here. The car stopped, the door opened, and out stepped the kind of man Nathaniel knew very well. Impeccable suit, the smile of someone who believed the entire world owed him something. Clara? The man exclaimed, opening his arms as if expecting a hug. I finally found you. You have no idea how much trouble you gave me. Clara did not move. She looked like a statue made of ice. Nathaniel stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the unwelcome visitor. Who are you? The man raised an eyebrow, examining Nathaniel from head to toe. His eyes stopped at the dirt-covered boots, the worn flannel shirt, the calloused hands. And you are? Nathaniel Brooks. I live here. The caretaker? The man let out a short laugh. Clara, dear, you really outdid yourself this time. You ran away from me to hide in a servant's house. I did not run away from you, Victor, Clara said, her voice trembling but firm. I ran from a whole life of lies. So this was Victor Hayes, the ex-fiancé, the man who had humiliated Clara in public and destroyed her self-esteem. Nathaniel felt something hot rise through his chest. anger, pure and concentrated. "You are not welcome here," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Victor did not even look at him. "Clara, let us stop this little act. You had your moment of rebellion, you hid in the middle of nowhere, you played pretend at being poor. Very entertaining. But it is over now. It is time to come home." "I do not have a home anymore," Clara answered. "You made sure of that." "Oh, please." Victor rolled his eyes with soap opera-worthy drama. "Your family lost money. It happens. That is no reason to run away like a criminal. You humiliated me in front of 30 people. I was being honest. There is a difference." Nathaniel took another step forward. "She said you are not welcome. I suggest you leave." This time Victor looked at him. Really looked at him. With that kind of stare that wealthy and arrogant people reserve for those they consider inferior. "Listen here, Gardner. Caretaker. Whatever. You clearly do not understand the situation. Clara and I have history. Our families have business together. This is not a matter for—" He gestured vaguely in Nathaniel's direction. "Employees." "I am not anyone's employee," Clara said, her voice gaining strength. "And I have nothing left with you, Victor. Our engagement is over. You ended it yourself, remember? In front of everyone. You called my family failures. I was frustrated. You called me an investment that did not give a return." Victor had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. But only slightly. "I went too far. I admit it. But that does not change the fact that your family owes me money, Clara. A lot of money." The air became heavy. "What are you talking about?" Nathaniel asked. "Business," Victor answered with a smile that had nothing friendly about it. "Her father took a considerable loan from me 2 years ago, with interest, of course. When the company went bankrupt, the debt did not disappear. It just changed hands." Clara closed her eyes. "Victor, my father has already spoken with your lawyers. We are negotiating an agreement." "Negotiating?" Victor laughed. "Clara, dear, your father has nothing to negotiate with. The house is mortgaged, the cars have been sold. The only thing of value left in your family is you." The silence that followed was ice cold. Nathaniel felt his fists clench. "What do you mean by that?" Victor finally gave him his attention. "I mean that if Clara comes back with me, I forget the debt. Simple as that. She marries me. Her family goes free. Everyone walks away happy. That is blackmail." Nathaniel said, "That is business." Victor shrugged. "I do not expect a caretaker to understand." Clara was trembling. From anger, from fear, from frustration, Nathaniel could not tell. Maybe from all of it at once. "I am not going to marry you, Victor. Then your family will lose everything. They have already lost everything." "Not everything. There's still your grandmother's house. That little old farm in Vermont." Victor's smile was pure poison disguised as charm. "It would be a shame if it went to auction, would it not?" Clara took a step back as if she had been punched. "You would not do that." "I do not want to do it, dear, but you are not leaving me much of a choice." Nathaniel had heard enough. "Get off my property," he said, his voice low and firm. Victor burst out laughing. "Your property? You live in a wooden cabin in someone else's yard. This is not even yours." "Yes, it is." The words came out before Nathaniel could think. Something about Victor's tone, his arrogance, the way he treated Clara like an object, made Nathaniel lose his patience. "What did you say?" Victor stopped laughing. Nathaniel took a deep breath. He was about to reveal everything. The mansion, the money, the truth. He was about to destroy the lie he had so carefully built. But then he looked at Clara. At her tear-filled eyes, at her trembling hands, at the expression of someone who had already been humiliated too many times, and he pulled back. "It is my property because I take care of it," Nathaniel said. "For years, and you are trespassing. So leave before I call the police." Victor studied his face for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Fine, I will go. For now." He turned to Clara. "You have 1 week to think about it, dear. 1 week. After that, my lawyers take action." He walked back to his car, started the engine, and drove down the dirt road, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The silence that remained was deafening. Clara let herself fall onto the porch steps, her face buried in her hands. Nathaniel sat beside her without knowing what to say, without knowing how to fix it. "I am sorry," she whispered finally. "Sorry for bringing my problems here. You did not deserve this." "You do not have to apologize. I should have told you before. About Victor, about the debt, about everything." Nathaniel felt the irony tighten in his chest. her blaming herself for hiding things when he was hiding so much more. "Clara, look at me." She raised her reddened eyes. "You do not owe that man anything. It does not matter what he says. It does not matter what he threatens. You are not merchandise. You are not a bargaining chip. You are a person, and nobody has the right to treat you like that." A tear rolled down her face. "But my grandmother's house, we are going to figure this out. Together, I promise." Clara looked at him with an expression Nathaniel could not fully decipher. Gratitude, perhaps. Hope, and something deeper that he was afraid to name. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. "You barely know me." Nathaniel swallowed hard. "Because I am falling in love with you," he thought. "Because you make me want to be better. Because when you look at me, you see who I really am, not what I have." But he did not say any of that, because it is the right thing to do. He answered simply. Clara smiled, a small, fragile smile, but a real one. "Thank you, Nathaniel. Truly." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat there on the porch while the sun began to set. Nathaniel knew he had 1 week to find a solution. 1 week to protect Clara from Victor Hayes, and 1 week to decide whether to tell the truth before she found out on her own. Because if Victor came back and discovered who Nathaniel really was, the whole situation could change drastically, for better or for much, much worse. The sun had not even risen when Nathaniel gave up pretending he was asleep. He had spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Victor Hayes had said in his head. The arrogance, the threats, the way he looked at Clara as if she were an object to be retrieved. And worse, the way Nathaniel had almost revealed everything in the heat of the moment. He got out of bed, put on an old pair of pants and a shirt that had seen better days, and went out to the garden. The air was cold, the sky still dark, and the silence was absolute, perfect for an existential crisis. Nathaniel knelt before the rose bushes and began pulling weeds with more force than necessary. His hands worked automatically while his mind spun in circles. "You are lucky," he murmured to the flowers. "Did you know that? You do not have to explain why you chose to grow here and not somewhere else. Nobody asks a rose why it is a rose." He pulled out a particularly stubborn root and tossed it aside. "But me? I have to explain why a billionaire chose to live in a cabin. Why an heir prefers to get his hands dirty in the soil instead of attending fancy clubs. Why I do not want any of the things everyone thinks I should want." A red rose swayed gently in the wind. "Do not look at me like that. I know I am talking to myself, but you are better listeners than most people I know." Nathaniel continued working, moving to the next flower bed. "The problem is Clara," he said to a group of yellow roses. "She is different, genuine. She looks at me and sees Nathaniel, not Brooks of the Brooks fortune. She taught me to cut a bar of soap into 8 pieces, for goodness sake. 8 pieces." He laughed without humor. "And I let her. I sat there and learned. Because when she teaches me those things, she looks at me with pride, as if I were someone special for knowing how to save on detergent. Nobody has ever looked at me like that." The wind blew again, and Nathaniel could have sworn the roses were judging him. "Okay, I know. I lied to her. Technically, I omitted. But omission is just a more polite lie, is it not?" He sighed. "She is going to find out. Sooner or later, she is going to find out. And when she does, she's going to look at me differently. They all look at me differently when they know about the money." Nathaniel sat back on his heels and stared at the flowers. "You know what the worst part is? I could solve her problem in 5 minutes. The debt to Victor? I pay it. Her grandmother's house? I buy it. Everything that is threatening to destroy her life I can fix with 1 phone call to my lawyer." Silence. "But if I do that, she will know. And if she knows, everything changes. She will not want to share bone soup with me anymore. She will not teach me money-saving tricks anymore. She will not look at me as if I were just me." A white rose lost a petal, which floated gently to the ground. "I agree," Nathaniel said. "The situation is terrible. Dorothy, the chicken, chose that moment to appear out of nowhere and start pecking near Nathaniel's feet. And you," he asked the chicken, "do you have any wisdom to share?" Dorothy made a noise that sounded suspiciously like contempt and walked away. "Great, even the chicken thinks I am pathetic." Nathaniel went back to working on the weeds, trying to find peace in the repetitive motion. It was strange how getting his hands dirty in the soil could calm the mind. His therapist would probably have a lot to say about that, if he had a therapist. What he had was a butler who silently judged him and a chicken with attitude. "Sir?" Nathaniel nearly had a heart attack. He spun around and found Sebastian standing behind him, impeccably dressed as always, holding a cup of coffee. "Sebastian, you scared me. What are you doing here at this hour?" "I could ask the same, sir. It is 5:30 in the morning. I was gardening and talking to the flowers." Nathaniel felt his face get hot. "You heard that?" "I heard everything, sir. From the part about the roses being good listeners to Dorothy being dismissive." "How long were you standing there?" "Long enough to become concerned about your mental health, sir." Nathaniel rubbed his face with his dirty hands, probably spreading dirt everywhere. "I am fine, Sebastian." "With all due respect, sir, men who are fine do not wake up before dawn to ask rosebushes for advice." "I was not asking for advice. I was processing." "Processing. Yes, processing." Sebastian extended the coffee cup. "Here, you need it more than I do." Nathaniel accepted the coffee with gratitude. It was strong, hot, and exactly the way he liked it. "How did you know I was out here?" "Sir, I have worked for your family for 40 years. I know all of your habits. When you are stressed, you come to the garden. When you are very stressed, you talk to the plants. And when you are desperate—" Sebastian paused dramatically. "You talk to Dorothy." "I am not desperate." "You asked a chicken if she had wisdom to share." Nathaniel took a long sip of coffee instead of answering. "You should tell her the truth," Sebastian said after a moment. "I know. The longer you wait, the worse it will be." "I know. And if you do not tell her, someone else will." That Victor Hayes seemed like the type who investigates other people's lives. Nathaniel felt a chill in his stomach. "Do you think he will find out?" "I think it is a matter of time, sir. The Brooks name is not exactly unknown. One quick internet search and—" "Okay, I get it." Nathaniel placed the cup on the ground and turned back to the roses. "I am going to tell her. I just need to find the right moment." "If I may offer a suggestion, sir, the right moment rarely exists. Sometimes we need to create the moment." Nathaniel thought about the butler's words. He was right, of course. Sebastian was always right. It was irritating. "Thank you, Sebastian, for the coffee and the advice." "You are welcome, sir." The butler turned to leave but stopped. "And sir, yes, the roses agree with me." "How do you know?" Sebastian pointed to a red rose that was visibly leaning in his direction. "Intuition." And he left, leaving Nathaniel alone with his conspiring flowers. The sun finally began to appear on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Nathaniel stayed there, hands dirty with soil, mind a little calmer, watching the day begin. That was when he heard the cabin door open. Clara appeared on the porch, still in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep, rubbing her eyes. She looked around until she found Nathaniel in the garden. "Nathaniel?" Her voice was hoarse from sleep. "What are you doing out there at this hour?" He looked at her, at the face still creased from the pillow, at the eyes still half closed, and felt his heart tighten in a way he could not explain. "Gardening," he answered, standing up and wiping his hands on his pants. "Before the sun comes up? Plants wake up early." Clara laughed, a sound still half sleepy but genuine. "You are very strange, you know that? I have been told." She walked down the porch steps and came up to him, stopping just a few inches away. "You have dirt on your face." "I do? Right here." She reached out and wiped his cheek with her thumb. The touch was soft, gentle, intimate, in a way that made Nathaniel forget how to breathe for a second. "There," she said, smiling. "Now, you look less like a character from a horror movie and more like a normal gardener." "Thank you, I think." Clara looked around at the rose bushes, at the garden, at the brightening sky. "It is beautiful here in the early morning." "It is. It is my favorite time of day. I understand why." They stood in silence for a moment, side by side, watching the sun rise. It was peaceful, simple, exactly the kind of moment Nathaniel wanted to preserve forever. Then Clara turned to him with a serious expression. "Nathaniel, about yesterday." "Clara, you do not have to. I want to tell you everything, the whole story. About Victor, about my family, about how I ended up here." She took a deep breath. "You deserve to know the truth." Nathaniel felt the irony of those words like a punch to the stomach. "Okay," he said, swallowing his guilt. "Let us go inside. I will make coffee." Clara smiled and held his hand. "Thank you for everything." And as they walked back to the cabin, Nathaniel wondered how he was going to tell his own truth when she finished telling hers. The day passed slowly, heavy with anticipation. Clara had promised to tell him everything, but she asked for some time to organize her thoughts. Nathaniel respected that. He spent the day working in the garden, trying not to think too much, failing miserably. When night came, they sat on the cabin porch with 2 mugs of hot tea. The stars shone above them, and the only sound was the singing of crickets and the occasional sleepy clucking of Dorothy in the chicken coop. "Do you really want to hear?" Clara asked, looking at the sky. "It is a long and pathetic story. I want to hear everything you're willing to tell me." Clara took a deep breath and began. "I met Victor 4 years ago at a charity event. My father had just closed a big deal and we were celebrating. Victor was charming. Handsome, intelligent, funny. He knew exactly what to say. Sounds like a men's cologne commercial." Clara laughed softly. "That is exactly what it was. Everything very shiny on the surface. It took me a while to realize there was nothing underneath." She took a sip of her tea before continuing. "The engagement was practically arranged. Our families had business together, and a marriage made sense from a financial perspective. My father was excited. My mother planned the engagement party as if it were a real wedding. And I—" Clara shrugged. "I thought love would come with time, but it did not. What came were the humiliations. Small ones at first. A comment about my dress being too simple, a joke about me not understanding fine wines, a remark about how I needed to learn how to behave at important events." Nathaniel felt the anger boiling in his chest, but stayed quiet. "I tried to ignore it. I told myself he was stressed from work, that this was how wealthy people treated each other, that I needed to adapt." Her voice trembled slightly. "How foolish I was." "You were not foolish. You were trying to make it work." Clara shook her head. "I was shrinking myself, a little more each day, until there was almost nothing left of me." She placed the mug on the ground and hugged her own knees. "Then came the crisis. My father's business started to go wrong. One bad investment, then another, then a string of poor decisions. In 6 months, we lost almost everything." "And Victor?" "Victor was furious. Not because he was worried about me or my family. He was furious because, in his words, I had become a bad deal." Nathaniel clenched his fists. "A bad deal?" "That is what he said, in front of 30 people, at our engagement anniversary dinner." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. He stood up, tapped his glass on the table to get everyone's attention, and announced he was ending the engagement. He said he had invested 2 years in me, and that I had turned out to be a depreciated commodity. Those were his exact words. Depreciated commodity. Nathaniel felt his stomach turn. "Clara?" I was paralyzed. Everyone staring. Some people laughing, others pretending to be embarrassed while they recorded it on their phones. And Victor left as if he had just given a graduation speech. A tear rolled down her face, but she wiped it away quickly. "Sorry, it has been a long time and it still hurts. You do not need to apologize for feeling pain." Nathaniel moved closer and held her hand. "What he did was cruel, inhuman. You did not deserve any of that." Clara looked at their intertwined hands. "Sometimes I still hear his voice in my head, saying I am not good enough, that my worth depends on my family's bank account, that nobody will want me if I have nothing to offer." "Clara, look at me." She raised her eyes, glistening with held-back tears. "You are worth more than any fortune," Nathaniel said, his voice firm. "More than any bank account, any mansion, any business deal. You are generous, intelligent, funny, brave. You taught me to cut a bar of soap into 8 pieces, for goodness sake. That is talent." Clara laughed through her tears. "You say that because you do not have a fortune. It is easy to dismiss money when you do not have any." The irony of those words hit Nathaniel like a punch to the stomach. "But thank you," she continued, squeezing his hand. "Truly, it has been a long time since someone made me feel like I matter for who I am, not for what I have or do not have." Nathaniel swallowed hard. The truth was on the tip of his tongue. This was the moment, the perfect moment to tell her everything. To explain about the mansion, about the money, about the life he had hidden from her. But when he opened his mouth, other words came out. "You matter, Clara. To me, you matter very much." She smiled, a small but genuine smile. You matter to me too, Nathaniel. More than you should, considering we have known each other for such a short time. His heart raced. Why do you live here? Clara asked suddenly. Alone in this cabin, taking care of a huge property. The mansion is not yours, but the owner does not seem to mind if you live here. It is a strange situation. Nathaniel looked away toward the stars. It is a complicated story. More complicated than mine? Different. Clara waited, but he did not continue. You do not want to tell me? I do. And that was true. He desperately wanted to. But I am afraid. Afraid of what? Of you looking at me differently, he thought. Of you stopping to teach me money-saving tricks. Of you realizing that I am everything you are running from. Afraid of ruining what we have, he said instead. Clara was silent for a moment. Then she moved closer and rested her head on his shoulder. Everyone has secrets, Nathaniel. I just told you mine. When you are ready, you will tell me yours. I will be here. He put his arm around her, pulling her closer. They stayed like that for a long time in silence, watching the stars. Two broken people finding comfort in each other. Nathaniel knew he needed to tell the truth. Sebastian was right. The perfect moment did not exist. But that night, with Clara in his arms, the weight of secrets felt lighter. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe after solving the situation with Victor. Maybe when he was sure she would not leave. Maybe never. Nathaniel? Clara's voice was sleepy. Yes, thank you for listening to me, for not judging me. Always. She yawned and nestled closer against him. I like it here. The cabin, the garden, the chickens. You, especially you. Nathaniel's heart melted. I like you too, Clara. Especially you. She smiled against his shoulder and closed her eyes. Minutes later, her breathing became heavy and steady. She had fallen asleep right there in his arms under the stars. Nathaniel stayed perfectly still, afraid to wake her, afraid to break the moment. I am going to tell you, he whispered to the stars, or maybe to himself. I will. I just need a little more time. The stars did not answer, but the wind blew softly, swaying the trees around the cabin. And somewhere in the darkness, a phone beeped. Nathaniel frowned. It was not his. It was Clara's, lying on the porch floor. The screen lit up with a message. He did not want to look. He knew he should not. But the name on the screen caught his attention. Victor Hayes. And the words that appeared in the message preview made Nathaniel's heart freeze. I know who your new boyfriend is, Nathaniel Brooks. I did my research. You are not going to believe what I found out. The message glowed on the screen like a sentence. Nathaniel felt his heart stop. Clara was still sleeping in his arms, her breathing light and peaceful, completely unaware of the disaster that was about to happen. He looked at the phone, looked at Clara, looked at the phone again. His fingers moved before his brain could stop them. He opened the message and pressed delete. The guilt came instantly, heavy as concrete. He had just erased a message from her phone, without permission, without consent, like a digital criminal destroying evidence. What am I doing? He whispered to himself. Clara stirred in his arms. Nothing. Go back to sleep. She murmured something incomprehensible and nestled closer against him. Nathaniel sat there, motionless, holding her phone as if it were a grenade about to explode. What had Victor discovered? How much did he know? And more importantly, how long before he tried again? He needed to tell the truth. Now, before Victor did it for him. But Clara was sleeping so peacefully, and it had been such an emotional night, and he was a complete coward. Tomorrow, he promised the stars, I will tell her tomorrow. Tomorrow became the day after tomorrow, which became one more day, which became an entire week of Nathaniel waking up with the firm resolution to tell the truth and going to bed having failed miserably. The worst part was that Victor did not send any more messages. No calls. No black car climbing the dirt road. The silence was even more frightening than the threats. Nathaniel was living in a state of constant alert, waiting for the moment when everything would come crashing down. Sir, are you all right? Sebastian asked one morning, finding Nathaniel hiding behind a tree, watching the road. I am fine. Why? Because you are hugging a tree at 7 in the morning. I am not hugging it. I am strategically leaning. Sebastian frowned. Against what? Against the possibility of hostile black cars. The butler sighed deeply. You still have not told her, have you? I'm going to. When? Soon. Soon as in tomorrow or soon as in never. Sebastian, you are being very judgmental for someone who hid in a chicken coop wearing a suit last week. That was professional sacrifice. This is emotional cowardice. Nathaniel had no way to argue. The days passed, and Nathaniel started to notice something strange. Clara was working too much. Not in the garden or the cabin. She had started doing sewing work for the neighbors in the area. Early in the morning, he would find her bent over fabrics. In the afternoon, she would walk into town to deliver orders. At night, she would keep sewing under the lamplight until her eyes turned red. "Clara, you need to rest," he said one night, watching her fight against sleep while finishing a hem. "Just a little more. You are working too much." "I like working. Nobody likes working that much." Clara just smiled mysteriously and went back to her sewing. Nathaniel was intrigued. She had refused money when he offered to help with expenses. She said she needed to do her part, contribute somehow. But that frantic pace seemed different. It seemed to have a specific purpose. "Sebastian," Nathaniel called the next day, finding the butler in the mansion's kitchen. "Do you know why Clara is working so hard? Perhaps because she is a responsible person who does not want to live off of charity? It is not that. There is something more. She is hiding something." Sebastian poured a cup of tea with irritating calmness. "Just as you are hiding something from her? That is different." "Is it?" "Sebastian, I am being serious." "So am I, sir." The butler took a sip of tea. "But if you want to know, I overheard one of the neighbors mention that Miss Clara has been asking how much a good gift for a man costs." Nathaniel frowned. "A gift? For whom?" Sebastian stared at him with an expression that clearly said, "Are you slow or are you pretending? Your birthday is in 3 days." Oh no. Nathaniel had completely forgotten his own birthday. Years of extravagant parties organized by assistants had conditioned him to ignore the date. But Clara remembered, who barely had money for her own necessities, was working herself to exhaustion to buy him a gift. "I need to stop this," Nathaniel said. "She cannot spend money on me." "And how do you plan to do that without revealing that you know?" "Good question." Nathaniel tried to be subtle. "Clara, did you know that gifts are completely unnecessary in relationships?" She looked up from her sewing. "What?" "Yes, I read it in an article. Gifts create materialistic expectations. The real gift is companionship." What a strange article. Very reputable, from a university. Clara went back to sewing. Interesting. It did not work. Nathaniel tried again. "My birthday is overrated as a celebration. Everyone says that. But I truly feel it, in my soul." "Sure, Nathaniel, that did not work either." On his birthday, Nathaniel woke up with Clara sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a box wrapped in newspaper. "Happy birthday," she said, her eyes shining with anticipation. "Clara, you did not have to." "I know I did not have to. I wanted to." She held out the box. "It is not much. Actually, it is very little. But I worked an entire month to be able to buy it." Nathaniel took the box with slightly trembling hands. The newspaper was carefully folded, decorated with a ribbon that had clearly been reused from somewhere else. He opened it slowly. Inside, nestled in cotton, was a watch. Simple, silver, the kind you find in any department store for less than $50. And at the same time, the most valuable thing Nathaniel had ever received in his entire life. "I know it is nothing special," Clara said quickly, misreading his silence. "Your old watch was scratched and I thought, Clara, if you do not like it, I can exchange it. The woman at the store said she accepts returns within 30 days. Clara, I wish I could have bought a better one, but the sewing does not pay that well and—" "Clara." She stopped talking. Nathaniel raised his eyes, and Clara saw they were full of tears. "It is perfect," he whispered. "It is absolutely perfect." The guilt was crushing him from the inside. He had a safe in the mansion full of watches that cost small fortunes. He had inherited entire collections from his grandfather and his father. He had pieces that collectors would beg to buy. And there was Clara, who had worked herself to exhaustion for weeks, sacrificing sleep and comfort to give him a simple $50 watch, because she thought he was poor, because she thought that gift would mean something to someone who had nothing. And the horrible truth was that it did. It meant more than any expensive watch he had ever received, because it came from real sacrifice, from real love, from a real lie that he needed to undo. "Clara." Nathaniel set the watch aside and held her hands. "I need to tell you something." Her smile wavered. "What? About me? About who I really am? About—" The sound of an engine interrupted. They both turned to the window at the same time. A black car was climbing the dirt road, and Nathaniel knew with absolute certainty that time had run out. The black car stopped in front of the cabin, but this time it was not alone. Two other vehicles came right behind it, equally polished. Out of the door stepped Victor Hayes, two men in suits carrying leather briefcases, and a third man with the face of someone who had never smiled in his life. Clara. Victor opened his arms as if arriving at a party. Surprise! Clara shrank behind Nathaniel. What are you doing here? I came to settle our situation once and for all. Victor gestured to the men in suits. I brought my lawyers and the private detective I hired. Nathaniel felt his stomach sink. Private detective? Oh yes. Victor smiled, and that smile had nothing friendly about it. You did not think I would let my ex-fiancée run off with some random gardener without investigating, did you? The lawyers positioned themselves on either side of Victor like bureaucratic bodyguards. The detective stayed behind, with a folder under his arm and an expression of professional boredom. Victor, please, Clara said, her voice trembling. Just leave. We have nothing to discuss. I agree we have nothing to discuss, but we have a lot to settle. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and waved it in the air. Court order. You are illegally occupying private property. Nathaniel blinked. What? That is right. Trespassing. My lawyers checked the records. This land belongs to a company called Brooks Holdings, and neither of you has any documented authorization to be here. Clara looked at Nathaniel with confusion. Nathaniel, what is he talking about? He did not tell you? Victor pretended surprise. Oh, this is even better than I imagined. Clara, dear, your gardener boyfriend is not who you think he is. The detective stepped forward and opened the folder. Nathaniel James Brooks, 34 years old, sole heir to the Brooks fortune, legal owner of all this land including the mansion and the cabin. Estimated net worth of… Enough, Nathaniel raised his hand. No, let him finish, Victor said, clearly enjoying himself. The part with all the zeros is the best. Clara stood frozen like a statue, her eyes fixed on Nathaniel. Is this true? Nathaniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. Victor seized the silence. Of course it is true. Your boyfriend is a billionaire, Clara. A billionaire, and there you were teaching him how to save on soap. He burst out laughing. That is simply priceless. Be quiet, Victor, Nathaniel said, his voice dangerously low. Or what? You are going to throw me out. By what authority? Oh wait, you do have authority. You just forgot to tell your girlfriend. Victor turned to the lawyers. Please proceed with the notification. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, although you are technically the owner, there are no records of residential permission for Miss Bennett. This constitutes… Something snapped inside Nathaniel. He had spent weeks hiding, weeks lying, weeks letting fear control every decision. And now Victor Hayes was standing there in front of his home with lawyers and detectives trying to humiliate the woman he loved. Enough. Sebastian, Nathaniel shouted, his voice echoing across the property. Clara's eyes went wide. Sebastian? Who is… The mansion door opened. Sebastian descended the steps with the dignity of a general marching to war. His suit impeccable as always, his posture perfect. Mr. Brooks? Victor frowned. Mr. Brooks? The lawyers exchanged nervous glances. Call security, Nathaniel said, his voice firm. Get this man off my land. Now, Sebastian tilted his head slightly. With pleasure, sir. The butler raised his hand and made a discreet gesture. Out of nowhere, as if they had sprouted from the ground, 6 security guards appeared. 2 came from the mansion. 2 came from the back. 2 descended from a guard post Clara had never noticed. All huge, all in black suits, all with expressions that clearly said, please, make our day more interesting. Victor turned pale. What? Where did? Escorts for Mr. Hayes and his companions. Sebastian said calmly, please ensure they reach their vehicles safely, and that they do not come back. 2 guards approached Victor. Wait. Victor backed up, tripping over his own feet. You cannot do this. I have rights. I have lawyers. Your lawyers are welcome to contact the Brooks Holdings legal department. Sebastian replied, preferably in writing, during business hours. The guards took Victor by the arms, one on each side, and began to escort him toward the car. This is absurd. Victor struggled uselessly. Clara, ask him. Ask who he really is. Ask why he has a butler. Ask whose mansion that is. The lawyers were already running to their own cars, clearly wanting distance from the situation. The detective closed his folder and left without saying a word, probably calculating how much extra he would charge for that embarrassment. "You lied to her." Victor kept screaming as he was pushed into the car. "You are just as much of a liar as I am. Worse. At least I never pretended to be poor." The car door slammed. The engine started, and within seconds, Victor Hayes and his entourage were heading down the dirt road, leaving only a cloud of dust behind. The silence that followed was deafening. Sebastian cleared his throat discreetly. "Sir, security will make sure they leave the property completely. Should I arrange anything else?" Nathaniel shook his head, unable to speak. "Very well." The butler looked at Clara, who was frozen in the same spot, eyes wide. "Miss Bennett." He gave a small bow and withdrew. The security guards vanished just as mysteriously as they had appeared, and then it was just the two of them. Nathaniel and Clara. The silver watch was still in Nathaniel's hand, the $50 gift from the woman who thought he had nothing. Clara turned slowly. Her eyes were glistening, but not from sadness, from something worse. Confusion, betrayal, pain. "Nathaniel." "Clara, I can explain. You own all of this?" "Yes." "But the mansion?" "Yes." "The security guards?" "Yes." "The butler?" "Sebastian has worked for my family for 40 years. Clara let out a laugh that had nothing funny about it. "And there I was teaching you how to save on soap. Clara? I shared bone soup with you." "Bone soup, Nathaniel, thinking you did not have money to buy decent food. I know, and I am sorry, but—" "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why did you do this?" Nathaniel swallowed hard. "Because I wanted you to like me for who I am, not for what I have." "And who are you, Nathaniel?" Clara took a step back. "Because right now I have absolutely no idea." She turned and started walking toward the road. "Clara, wait. I need air. I need to think. Where are you going?" She stopped, but did not turn around. "I do not know. But I cannot stay here right now. I cannot even look at you." And then Clara Bennett walked down the dirt road, leaving Nathaniel alone in front of the cabin, holding a $50 watch that was worth more than anything he had ever owned. Nathaniel stood in the same spot for far too long. His feet felt glued to the ground as he watched Clara disappear around the bend in the road. The silver watch was still in his hand, the cold metal against his sweaty palm. She had left, and he deserved it. "Sir?" Sebastian's voice came from behind him, but Nathaniel did not turn around. "She left, Sebastian. I saw, sir. She hates me. She probably does not hate you, sir, but she is certainly very upset." Nathaniel finally turned. Sebastian was standing on the cabin porch, hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable as always. "What do I do now?" "Well, you have a few options." Sebastian descended the steps calmly. "You can stand here until you grow roots. You can go inside the cabin and feel miserable alone. Or you can do something useful." "Like what?" "Like going after her." Nathaniel shook his head. "She said she needed space." "And are you going to give her space?" "It is the least I can do after everything." Sebastian sighed. "Sir, with all due respect, giving space is what cowards do when they do not want to face a difficult conversation." "Are you calling me a coward?" "I would never do that, sir. I am merely observing that you have a history of avoiding emotional confrontations." "I do not avoid emotional confrontations." Sebastian narrowed his eyes. "You spent weeks pretending to be a gardener to avoid having to explain your financial situation." "Caretaker. It does not matter. The point is that you would rather hide than be honest. And look where that brought us." Nathaniel had no way to argue. The butler stepped closer and placed his hand on Nathaniel's shoulder. "Mr. Brooks, I knew your parents. I have worked for your family since before you were born. And I can guarantee one thing, they would be very disappointed if they saw you give up this easily." The mention of his parents made something tighten in Nathaniel's chest. "My parents did not lie to the people they loved." "No, they did not, but they also did not run away when things got difficult." Sebastian paused. "Your father won your mother over even after spilling red wine on her dress on their first date. If he had given up at that moment, you would not exist." Nathaniel let out a weak laugh. "I never knew that story." "There are many things you do not know, sir, but it is not too late to learn." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange. Nathaniel looked at the empty road, then at the mansion on top of the hill, then at the cabin behind him. I stayed in this cabin because I could not live in the big house, he said quietly. After my parents passed, every room in that mansion reminded me of them. It was suffocating. I know, sir. But down here, in the middle of the garden, near the plants my grandfather planted, I could breathe. I could just be Nathaniel, not the Brooks heir. Sebastian nodded. And that is why you wanted Miss Bennett to know that version first. Exactly. Nathaniel looked at the silver watch in his hand. But I went too far. Hiding the truth out of fear is not the same thing as showing who I really am. A sharp observation, sir. It only took one complete disaster for you to reach it. Thank you for the emotional support, Sebastian. Always at your service. Nathaniel put the watch in his pocket and walked toward the garden. He needed to think. And thinking, for him, always worked better with his hands in the soil. He knelt before the sunflowers his grandfather had planted decades ago. The enormous flowers swayed gently in the wind, as if they were waving at him. I ruined everything, he murmured. The sunflowers did not answer. Of course not. They were flowers. But somehow, being there helped. At least you do not judge me, he said, pulling a weed absent-mindedly. You just grow wherever they plant you. The wind blew harder, and Nathaniel could have sworn the sunflowers swayed in agreement. He stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. Enough hiding. Enough being afraid. Enough letting things happen instead of making them happen. He went back to where Sebastian was waiting patiently. Where did she go? Miss Bennett? Sebastian discreetly checked his phone. Tony saw her walking toward town. She probably went to Mrs. Gloria's house. Mrs. Gloria. Of course, it was obvious. Clara did not know anyone else in the area. The matchmaker was her only connection there. Sir, may I suggest something? What? Perhaps it would be better to wait until tomorrow. Give the young lady time to process the information. Showing up now might seem like desperation. It is desperation, Sebastian. Yes, but she does not need to know that immediately. Nathaniel thought for a moment. Sebastian was right. Showing up chasing after Clara now, when she had just discovered the truth, would probably only make things worse. Fine, tomorrow. He took a deep breath. But first thing in the morning, I will not be able to wait longer than that. Understandable, sir. Nathaniel turned to go inside the cabin but stopped. Sebastian? Yes, sir? Thank you. For everything. For putting up with me all these years. The butler smiled, a rare expression that softened his normally serious features. It is a pleasure, Mr. Brooks, even when you make things unnecessarily complicated. Nathaniel went inside the cabin and closed the door. The place felt empty without Clara. Her sewing was still tossed in the corner. The mug she used was still in the sink. Her scent still lingered in the air. He sat on the bed and took the watch out of his pocket. $50. Weeks of work. All the effort of a woman who thought she was giving a gift to someone who had nothing. And he had watches at the mansion that cost the equivalent of entire houses. I am going to fix this, he said to the empty room. I promise. That night, Nathaniel did not sleep. He lay in the dark, rehearsing what he would say to Clara, discarding each version for being inadequate. When the first ray of sunlight appeared on the horizon, he was already on his feet, dressed and ready to go. He opened the cabin door and nearly tripped. Sitting on the porch steps with deep dark circles under her eyes and an exhausted expression was Clara. We need to talk, she said. Clara was sitting on the steps with her knees pulled against her chest. Nathaniel stood frozen at the door, unsure if he was dreaming or if she had really come back. Clara? I spent the night at Mrs. Gloria's house, she said without looking at him. I could not sleep. I kept pacing back and forth until she gave me a tea to calm me down. Nathaniel came down the steps slowly and sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. You came back? I did. Why? Clara finally looked at him. Her eyes were red, but not from sadness, from something more complicated. Because Mrs. Gloria asked me a question I could not answer. What question? She asked if you had treated me badly, if you had humiliated me, if you had done anything to hurt me on purpose. Nathaniel swallowed hard. And what did you say? Nothing, because the answer was no. Clara sighed. You lied to me, Nathaniel. That is true, but you did not treat me badly. You did not humiliate me. You did not make me feel inferior. I would never do that. I know, and that is the part that confuses me. The sun was rising behind the mountains, tinting the sky in pink and gold. Dorothy came out of the chicken coop and started pecking near them, completely unaware of the human drama unfolding. Mrs. Gloria said something else. Clara continued. She said that a billionaire who learns to make bone soup to stay close to a woman is not lying. He is desperate to be loved for who he is. Nathaniel felt his eyes burn. She is right. I know she is. That is why I came back. Clara turned to face him completely. But I need to understand, Nathaniel. I need to understand why you did this. The complete truth. No more omissions. He nodded and took a deep breath. My parents passed when I was 22 years old. Clara stayed silent. I inherited everything. The mansion, the companies, the money. Everything. And suddenly, I was the young single billionaire everyone wanted to meet. Nathaniel let out a bitter laugh. You have no idea how many women appeared out of nowhere wanting to comfort me. I can imagine quite a few. Dozens. Hundreds maybe. And all of them looked at me the same way, as if I were a prize, a trophy, a bank account with legs. Dorothy passed between them, clucking softly. I tried living in the mansion, Nathaniel continued. For 2 years, I tried. But every room reminded me of my parents. Every hallway echoed with memories, and the people who visited only wanted to know about the size of the pool and the value of the paintings. So you moved to the cabin. My grandfather built this cabin when he arrived in the United States. He started with nothing. He worked his entire life. He made a fortune, but he never forgot where he came from. Nathaniel looked at the wooden structure behind him. When I came to live here, I was finally able to breathe. I could just be Nathaniel. Clara processed the information in silence. And the candidates Mrs. Gloria brought? 7 women. All of them ran when they saw the cabin. None of them wanted to know why I lived here. None of them asked about me, about my story. They just saw the simple house and left. Until I arrived. Until you arrived. Nathaniel turned to her. And you looked at this cabin and said, "Thank God, finally peace." Nobody had ever reacted like that. Nobody. Clara smiled slightly. I was running from a mansion full of empty appearances. Seeing a simple and honest home was like finding water in the desert. And when you thought I was the caretaker, gardener, whatever, when you thought that, I saw an opportunity. A chance to be known for who I am, not for what I have. He lowered his eyes. I should have told you the truth. I know, but with each passing day, it became harder. Because you looked at me with admiration for knowing how to save soap, and nobody had ever admired me for something so simple. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Dorothy came back and settled at her feet as if she were participating in the conversation. You taught me to cut a bar of soap into 8 pieces, Nathaniel said, to make bone soup, to reuse rice water, and every lesson was the best part of my day, because you were sharing something real with me, something that had nothing to do with money. I thought I was helping you save money. And you were. You were teaching me that the most valuable things in life cost nothing. Clara let out a laugh that was half a cry. That was very cheesy, Nathaniel. I know, but it is true. She wiped a tear that escaped. I spent the whole night thinking about Victor, who saw me as an investment, thinking about all the people who abandoned me when my family lost money, thinking about how the world works. And what did you conclude? Clara looked at him with intensity. I concluded that you are the first man who made me feel valuable without trying to buy me. You listened to me, you respected me, you learned to make bone soup just to spend time with me. She shook her head. What billionaire does that? A very lonely billionaire. A very special billionaire. Nathaniel's heart raced. So, do you forgive me? Clara stood up and extended her hand to him. I fell in love with the man who takes care of plants before dawn. With the man who talks to sunflowers and gives a name to a chicken. With the man who lives in a cabin because mansions are too empty. Nathaniel took her hand and stood up. And the billionaire? The billionaire is going to have to learn to cut soap for the rest of his life. Because I am not going to stop teaching. He laughed, and it was a laugh of pure relief. I accept those terms. Clara moved closer and rested her forehead against his. But if you hide anything else from me, I swear I will leave and take Dorothy with me. Understood. Complete transparency from now on. Good. And then she kissed him. It was a simple kiss, soft, full of promises and new beginnings. Dorothy clucked in approval. They married 1 month later, in a simple ceremony on the cabin porch. Sebastian was the best man. Mrs. Gloria cried the entire time. Tony, the gardener, was finally able to get out of the fish pond and watch while standing up. Nathaniel wore the silver watch Clara had given him. She wore a dress she had sewn herself. Years later, when the children asked why they lived in a cabin when there was an enormous mansion right up the hill, Clara always gave the same answer. Because this is where your father truly found me. And some things are too valuable to trade for bigger walls. And every time she said that, Nathaniel would smile and go tend to the garden. Some things never change. And the best things do not need to change. Nathaniel proved that true wealth is not in the luxury we display, but in the truth we live. A mansion can shelter people, but only genuine love, born in simplicity, can shelter the soul. If you felt that too, leave in the comments the rating you would give this story, and if you believe everyone needs to learn to value the essence above the appearance. Subscribe. Those who choose with the heart never lose their way. Until the next story.